Hi, everyone. Hi, we're a little early. I'm going to, hello. Hello, who's this? Itor? Let's see. Okay, so maybe I'll just start talking really quickly first. I just want to introduce myself again. I'm Deidre. I'm the workshop designer at Live-In Farms, and welcome, and thanks for joining me. It's a little rainy here where I am. We're outside today, not in the office. And also, welcome to our new platform that we're using, Demio. This is going to be the first time for us using this. So please, please, please let us know how we're doing, and let us know if this is a better, if you find that this is a better platform. And we'd love to hear your thoughts, and we would also really love to hear about any improvements you might want to suggest. So let's see. Okay, maybe I'll just start I'll just start now. People can join in. And just because this is a new platform, please, you can actually scroll, you can move the presentation and my video, so you can make my video much smaller if you'd rather zoom into the presentation or play around with it. Feel free to do that. And I have my colleague Christina here, so please, feel free to type in your questions, and she'll help me filter them out so I can make sure I get to them later. Okay. All right, so today this is going to be webinar number 4, and we're going to be talking about food waste processing. I will be talking about what that is exactly. I'll be talking about how that links to our product, the Hive Explorer 2.0. And I'll also be giving a demonstration on how you can make your own Bokashi starter, which you can buy, of course, but we would like to also show you how you can make it yourself. All right. Okay, so let's start with the term food waste processing, because maybe that's a term you're not so familiar with, but basically food waste processing is what we're talking about when we have food waste, which is a very natural part of cooking. And it's a term we use to deal with that waste after we've created it. If you live, it depends on where you live, but if you live in a place like I do, which is in Hong Kong, food waste is very often lumped in with all the other types of waste. And so we actually send everything to the landfill together. This creates some big problems, which I'll talk to you more about in the presentation. But in general, food waste is actually a very precious resource that we can use that can benefit not only us, but our mealworms, and also like our plants and other microorganisms as well. All right, so if we're going to talk about food waste processing, the first thing we need to discuss is just to have a reminder about what organic and inorganic waste is. Organic waste is that waste that is able to be broken down into much simpler parts if you put it into the soil. These will include things that generally occur naturally, like eggshells and banana peels and those kinds of things. While inorganic waste are usually synthetic, they don't break down if you do put them out into the soil, and because they won't actually break down into chemicals that can be used by plants or anything. They generally will break down into just smaller versions, smaller different pieces of themselves. So that's an important differentiation. And the reason why we need to know this is because food waste is a type of organic waste. And if we want to be able to process food waste, we need to understand that organic waste can, sorry, I need to take a pause for a minute. Okay, so organic waste and inorganic waste are often mixed in together. When we throw them into the landfill, what we'll get is that in the landfill, the organic waste will start to break down without the presence of oxygen, which is different than if you were to just throw the organic waste out into the soil, because there is a presence of air. And that results in a different chemical breakdown so that it produces methane instead of carbon dioxide. This is a really big problem because even though both methane and carbon dioxide are greenhouse gases, methane is up to 100 times more warming than carbon dioxide. So contributing to the excess of methane in our atmosphere can result in an even faster rate of global warming and global climate change than we're already seeing, which is a huge problem. But the good news is that we can actually separate our organic and inorganic waste and be able to process those things ourselves, the organic waste, I mean, so that the inorganic waste we can send to these landfills or to processing plants where, where these different facilities can take care of them. But the organic waste is simple enough that we can deal with it at home, and there's multiple benefits for that. So if we're talking about food waste processing, there's two major types. There's composting and there's fermentation. Composting happens in the presence of air, and that's the breakdown of these organic materials into simpler compounds, simpler materials, and just nutrients that can later be used by these microorganisms or by even our houseplants. For Bokashi fermentation, this is when you're taking the food waste and you're processing it without any air. What it does is something similar to pickling, where you can keep the food waste, actually preserve it for a little while, and you can keep it for a long time. And the benefit of that is that if, for example, we're creating this food waste, we're collecting it at home, sometimes, depending on the amount of mealworms that we have, they won't always be able to eat everything, but we also can't feed the food waste if it starts to mold and go bad. So what we can do is collect that food waste, preserve it, and then we can start to feed it in our own time. Something that I want to stress is that composting and fermentation actually go hand in hand. This isn't an either-or situation. Even when you're doing Bokashi fermentation properly, the whole process actually involves some composting. And you can see from this slide that you start with the food, you get the food waste after you're done eating it, and then you can ferment it for a little bit. And eventually you can take the fermented parts, whether you keep it, you can store it in the fridge, or you can even leave it outside to compost so that can further break down and be used for the plants. So you can use them hand in hand. Okay, so another thing I want to emphasize is actually every single part of this chain that I'm showing you today is useful, whether to us or to our mealworms or to our plants. And this goes to help help us go from this linear process to a more circular process, similar to what I talked about in our second webinar, and helps to create just a more circular system for our food waste, which is important. Okay, and food waste processing has a lot of different benefits. Like I said, there was the methane. We can stop methane from being produced in the landfills by processing the food waste in our own homes. We can save landfill space, because that is also, we don't think about it, but landfill space is a limited resource for many of us. I would encourage all of you to take the time and learn about how food waste, or just waste in general, is dealt with in your city or in your country. And you may find that it might not be what you expect, and it's actually better that we know, because that can inform our decisions about which kinds of food waste processing is good for our own purposes and makes sense in the context that we live in. because every place is different. Some places they'll help you process the food waste, and in other places you have to do it completely on your own. It's good to be mindful of that. And let's see, so the third reason is that the third reason it's important is because we actually benefit a lot if we process the food waste ourselves. I mentioned very briefly that the food waste can go on to help feed our mealworms. It can help feed our plants. And I will be talking about a case study happening that has occurred in my own home country of Indonesia later on in the webinar series that talks about how it actually benefited the community to be able to process this food waste and to empower people to be able to do it in their own homes. And you really don't need a lot of money. I think that's an important part of this, is that there are actually simple tools and things that you can use in your own house. Like, you may need to buy one or few things, but in general, it is very much possible for you to do these things at home. Okay, and I just want to talk about 3 different types of composting really quickly. So there's actually, if you try to look up on like whatever search engine you use, you'll find that there's a lot of different types of composting. The people that I know who are the most successful at composting don't use just one type. They actually use multiple types of composting methods because each method is different and each method can deal with different types of waste. So for example, the composting pile, you need to be able to have it in an open space. That's not convenient for a lot of people, especially if you live in an apartment. And also it takes 3 to 4 months to process at a time. So it does take a while. You generally will be able to put in fruits, vegetables, eggshells, things like that, coffee grinds, and you can also include garden waste into that, which is not something you can put in all types of composting, especially the smaller ones. So if you do have a garden, then this is actually a great tool for you. And it relies on the natural microbes in the soil to be able to break down the food waste for you. And this is a type of decomposition. Okay, and the next type is called vermicomposting, which maybe if you're joining us on this webinar, you know a little bit about, but they generally use these small earthworms, which are not insects, but anyway, they're these earthworms. Generally, they're red wrigglers, but there are different other types of earthworms depending on where you are. They process the food waste much faster, and it relies on their digestion process. You can put in fruits and vegetables and eggshells, but you can't put any citrus, you can't put any meat, and you shouldn't be putting any garden waste in there as well. But the benefit of it is that it only takes 3 to 4 weeks as compared to 3 to 4 months. And once you have those earthworms, it does take a little bit of maintenance, but in general, a lot of people like to use this because of the speed that these earthworms are able to convert the food waste into fertilizer for their plants. Okay, and lastly, we have Bokashi fermentation. This does not use air, like I said, and it can be paired with composting if you want to break the food waste down further. This can take as little as 2 weeks to do, which is really convenient, and it's also quite small. You can do it at varying sizes, but actually, let's see, I have a bin for you. Oh, you can do it in a bucket like this. I will get the Bokashi bucket later. But in general, this can be put underneath your sink, indoors. It really doesn't smell so long as you leave it alone and you keep the lid closed and you get the proper bin. And so it's super convenient for those of us who live in apartments or maybe don't even have a garden of our own. Another benefit is that you get what's called Bokashi juice, which is a concentrated fertilizer, and while you're processing the food waste using Bokashi fermentation, you're removing a lot of the water in the preservation process, and that water can be used to further water your plants. And it does need to be diluted, but in general, that's a very potent source of nutrients for them. Okay, and this is, like I said, it's a fermentation process, not a decomposition process. Okay, so you're probably wondering at this point how this relates to the Hive Explorer, and I put it in here. It really relates to the input within the Hive Explorer. So like I said, sometimes your food waste, as you're generating it, you can, because depending on the amount of people that you have in your house, you might be generating food waste at a rate that's faster than the mealworms are actually able to eat it, depending on the amount of worms, depending on the amount of people in the house, right? So this is a great tool because we can preserve the food waste so we can keep it longer. Once we put it through the Bokashi fermentation process, we can put it in the fridge and keep it there. And another added bonus is that we can include more types of food into the diet of these mealworms, because the fermentation process makes the food easier for the mealworms to digest. Mealworms naturally will eat grains, like they love old bread waste, they love oats, they love carrots and potatoes and all those things. But there are things like, say, like meat and like eggshells, and they can't eat those the way that they're generated from our kitchen. So by fermenting them, we can increase the types of food that they can eat, making it easier for them to process themselves, and like it increases the diversity of their diet, basically. Okay, so I've talked for a little bit now, and I actually do want to talk to you guys about making your own Bokashi starter. It's definitely something that you can buy in a store, but if you have the means to do it, and I'll show you, it's pretty easy actually, you can make it yourself. And so the first thing we're going to need, just keep in mind though that these measurements here are from the workshop that we use. I'm actually going to be using different measurements, and what I'll be sending to you all is the ratio so that you can figure out how much you need for yourself. I'm actually going to be making one much smaller. So, okay, let's see. The first thing we need will be EM powder. EM powder is effective microorganism powder. This is probably the thing that you will actually have to buy. Okay, I'm going to actually stop the slideshow for a minute, but this is the one that I'm using. You can find it at a lot of gardening stores. Just ask them. What it is they have these microorganisms, good microorganisms, to help you process your food waste already living in here. And the Bokashi starter that we're making is basically just promoting the growth of more of these guys. So we're going to need 25 grams of this first, and I've already measured that out here. Just use an old plastic cup. You don't need to buy any fancy equipment. Okay, and then we're going to need molasses. Okay, I have a bottle here. This is what I used. Okay, you only need 3 milliliters of this. So I have that in a cup right here. Okay, and 12 milliliters of dechlorinated water, which I have in here. You can take tap water, even drinking water. What you're going to want to do is actually take it the night before, put it in a cup like this, and actually just leave it to sit for the night, because you want the chlorine that's in the water to evaporate. And even though you might live in an area where your tap water is drinkable, you still want to let the chlorine evaporate, because it's part of how a lot of countries clean the water. And it's fine, it doesn't bother us, but it can affect the growth of your microorganisms. Okay, and finally what we need is 225 grams of rice bran. For us at Live-In Farms, we generally get the rice bran from a factory that makes rice. Rice bran is the leftover husk parts that are ground into powder, and we get it from this rice manufacturer because it's waste for them. They don't really need it. But because of the whole COVID situation, I don't really have rice bran. So what I've done is actually taken the oats that I feed my mealworms, right? And I've mixed it, I processed it into a powder. So it's here. It's just, so it's a fine powder. You want to increase the surface area for your microbes to be able to eat them. Okay, there's 225 already in here. Okay, so you've got 4 things. You've got the EM powder, the molasses, the dechlorinated water, and the rice bran. And you're going to need a bucket to be able to mix these all in, which I have here. And this is an activity we actually do with the students we work with, and we tell them, don't use gloves. We don't want them to be afraid of getting their hands dirty. And in particular, when you're making this, you want to be able to use your hands so you can get the correct moisture. That's not something you'll actually be able to feel with the gloves. So don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. I have, what we do in my house is that we use old t-shirts that we cut up. This is just the sleeve of an old t-shirt. This can be your rag, totally fine, just reuse what you have. Okay, and as I'm working on this, I'm going to really quickly look at the chat so that while I'm talking to you guys and while I'm showing you how to mix the Bokashi starter, can maybe ask some questions. If you guys don't mind just typing in your questions, yeah, type them in so that Christina can pull them up and I'll be able to answer them while I'm doing this. And meanwhile, I'm just going to mix the Bokashi starter. Okay, the first thing we want to do is we're going to take our oats, or the rice bran, or whatever you have. That's this, 225 grams. We're going to put it all in to the bucket. Okay, I'm also going to take this this molasses. I'm going to pour it in the water. I'm going to mix it up real good. You might need to dip it a few times. So you know, molasses is very, what's the word in English? Viscous. Sorry, sometimes I get mixed up with my Indonesian. Right. Can dip that in a few times. It's all right to be messy. That's what we tell the kids. This is, real science can happen in the laboratory or outside, where things are a little more messy. All right, and you can see once it's dissolved, it's going to turn this nice clear brown color. There shouldn't be any more bits in it. You've got that, right? That's good. I'm gonna put that to the side. Take our grains. Next, we're going to take the EM starter. I'm gonna put that all in as well. Something that's good to note while you're doing this is that the EM starter should have a nice smell to it. It shouldn't smell sour. It shouldn't smell really bad, but there should be an almost sweet smell to it. An important part of this, remember to just wash your hands before and after. Okay, and we're just gonna mix this slowly first. Okay, we wanna get that really nice and well mixed. Okay, and we have a question here. Yep, about whether these courses at schools are school courses or private courses. We design our own courses here at Live in Farms, and you can either buy the curriculum with the Hive Explorer on our online website, hiveexplorer.com, or you can go through the school, and the schools will purchase their own curriculums as well. Okay, we're going to start by pouring in a little bit of this water first. You only want to put a little bit, and then you're just going to start mixing with your hands. Okay, we're only adding a little bit at a time because it's much easier to add moisture to the solution as opposed to take it away. And you want to be able to mix it in really well. Okay, and then once you feel like you've mixed in the water, you take a handful and you're going to squeeze it. Okay, and this is what I get. If it's crumbly, like what we have here, that means there's not enough moisture. If you squeeze it and water comes out, then you have too much moisture, and you're going to need to add more of your rice bran or your oats. Okay, and try to get the lumps out if you can. Right, mix it again. We find that the students really love these hands-on activities. And it's quite simple ingredients, actually. It's just 4 ingredients. And definitely because of the COVID situation, had to change some of the ingredients a little bit, such as the rice bran into the oat bran. But those are substitutions that you could definitely do. It's possible. I think the only thing you might have trouble substituting would be the EM powder, but that's actually pretty easy to find right now. Okay, you can see it's getting a little nicer. It's a little like baking, actually, except without the equipment. You can see when I squeeze here, okay, see, that's a lot nicer. We don't have quite as much crumbling, although it's still a little bit. Okay, so we're gonna add a little bit more, which is good. We only have a tiny bit left in here, so I'm just gonna add everything. And I'm only making a small batch today, but a great thing about this is that if you do happen to make extra Bokashi starter, we found that the mealworms actually really like it too. All it is those microorganisms with the source of oats and the molasses, so it's not, they can eat everything in there. Okay. Awesome. What we have here now is actually pretty great. It's pretty close to what we're looking for. You want to be able to squeeze it in your hand, and got a big clump like this, which is nice. It's actually still a tiny bit dry, so what I'm going to do is I have some water here. Been doing this one-handed, so keep one hand clean. Just a tiny bit. I'm going to keep mixing again. Okay, and I see that I still have a tiny bit of molasses, so I'm just gonna also add some in there. All right, mix it. It's looking awesome. Yeah, the birds are definitely enjoying the weather, and it's really nice to be outside right now. Okay, good. We can see here that it's getting a lot nicer. Okay, so as we move on from here, just gonna have a tiny bit more water while I'm talking to you guys, is you're going to need some plastic bags. You can use the trash bags if you use those at home. I have some shopping bags here, like extra shopping bags. I would always encourage people to bring their own reusable shopping bags, but sometimes if you forget, you can still use those shopping bags so you can give them another life at home. You can see we're getting much nicer consistency now. Okay, good. Yeah, so this is what you want. You want to be able to squeeze it. There's no excess coming out. There's no crumbly bits coming out. It's a little like Play-Doh. That's pretty nice. Okay, and we have a question here. What makes the Bokashi juice a good fertilizer? The Bokashi juice, like I said, is pretty much the excess of all that food waste. So a lot of the food waste will have water in it naturally. If you put in things like apple peels or like different fruit scraps or vegetable scraps, that all has a lot of water in it already. And all that water, we're trying to remove the water from there. So that water is going to drain out, and it's mixed with a lot of the nutrients from the food themselves. And so when it comes out, it's going to just be a concentrated version of all of that really good vitamins and things. And that is great for the plants. Okay, just a tiny bit more, we're almost there. And if you want to use the juice for your plants, I suggest using, once you've collected it, use a mixture of the juice, 1 part juice, 10 parts water. Because it is very concentrated, you could actually end up overloading your plants if you use too much. So just keep that in mind. You can also play around with it a little bit too. Okay, so we're done actually. Perfect. Just gonna wipe my hands really quickly. All right, if you're at home, take the time to wash your hands properly. But in general, I would suggest using 2 different plastic bags. I've got one here, and we're just going to put all of this right inside. The plastic bag may have holes, which happens, which is why I always advocate using 2 bags. Let's see. Got that, put it in, scoop everything out. Okay. And now you're going to have this plastic bag with your starter in there, right? Tell you this way. And what you're going to want to do is you want to make sure there is no air. Because if you remember, we were saying that the fermentation process, we don't want any kind of air in that when we're fermenting the food waste. Well, we're not fermenting the food waste yet, but the types of microbes that we want to have grow are going to be the types that don't like air. So I'm going to have that in a ball. I'm just kind of squeezing all the air out. Okay, something like this. And you just want to tie that. Okay, and we're going to take this other plastic bag. I'm going to put it in here. And we're going to do the same thing. Try to make it as tight as possible. And what we're going to do is actually now, we're going to leave it to sit for 2 weeks. It's good to be able to put this in a cool place, a dry place, so that the moisture doesn't get, no extra moisture is going to get in. Because remember, we worked so hard to get the correct moisture. If you live in a place like Hong Kong where it happens to be very humid, you're not going to want to introduce any extra moisture from the air. Okay, and you want to put it in a dark place as well so it doesn't get too hot. It should be cool, dark. Under the sink is a great place. And we're going to check on this in 2 weeks. We'll open it, and it's good to smell it. What I mentioned before with the EM powder is that there's a slight sweet smell. That should be the smell that we should be smelling here. If it smells bad, you know that the process has gone wrong and you need to start again. What most likely happened is that air was introduced. And an important thing is that if you have to also look at it, if you get white mold, that's actually okay. But as soon as you see black or brown mold or green mold, that's not good, and you're going to have to start again. So, okay, that's pretty much it for the demonstration. If you did join us today, I want to encourage you to check out our website. We're having 20% off for the people who attended this program. So we'll give you the code. Yep, there's the discount code, WormyWebinar4. And it's only valid for the next 12 hours, starting in about 20 minutes. So please, when you have time, it's great to just click there. Like I said, I would encourage you all to see how your waste is processed where you're from. We would love to hear about your experiences, whether you've tried composting in the past, whether you've tried fermentation in the past. And we will be sending out the ratio of the materials and the material list of what I've just shown you. And we would love to see how your own shot at this goes. For next time, what we're going to be doing is actually processing the food waste. And so I'll show you how to set up the Bokashi bin. I'll show you how to, like, what kinds of things can go in, what kind of things shouldn't go in, and also how you use the Bokashi starter that we made, and how you're supposed to use that within the bin itself. Okay, so yeah, please share. We would love to hear you, and tag us. We're on social media as well. Okay, thanks everyone for joining. Bye, have a great day, and stay safe, wear your masks.